Morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Day Ride and another morning walk and talk. It is Saturday morning, and I'm on my way to some business meetings. So, perfect time to answer some questions and talk about the week that was Badger football. I'm going to try to do this as I'm dodging the Saturday morning traffic because it is pretty busy here this morning, but a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. So the first question we got, very long, very detailed question, and of course I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to be paraphrasing here. And it's essentially questioning the strategy that the Badgers are putting forward right now in terms of the transfer portal. And that strategy is, instead of going after the big name recruits coming from big name programs, the Badgers seem to be focusing on lower level players from D or FCS, D3, even NIA. And what is the strategy behind that? Why are they doing that? Is it potential versus production? And that's a very good question. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And while it is risky, the idea is that the way I see it, they are targeting players who've spent the last couple of years playing college football and actually being on the field. And where you could actually see production on the field. And you're not watching highlights from practice, where what happens on the practice field is very different than what happens on the game field. So, while it is risky to bring in players who come from a lower level into the Big Ten, I find it funny that Badger fans are against this idea. And stick with me on this. Because I would say this: if these kids were coming in from Reedsburg High School or Madison Edgewood or whatever, and they were high school kids who had offers to FCS schools and D3 schools, we'd be jumping over the moon to get them because, hey, they're Wisconsin kids. Never mind that they're only being recruited by lower level schools. I would also say is a lot of these kids are the type of players that would have been recruited by the Badgers just based on star level, etc., location. These are the type of guys who would have been low-level scholarship players. A guy like Matt Young would have been the type of kid back in the day who would get a walk-on and spend 3 years being practice squad hero and then bursting his way onto the scenes. He looks like the type of player who would come from nothing and become something. But we are all of a sudden too high and mighty that we don't want to accept these players because they're coming from a lower level. And if I really want to be frank, and a lot of the people who believe in Wisconsin high school football are going to hate me when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. What's the difference between bringing in low-level college players into the Badgers and bringing in low-level high school players, like players from the state of Wisconsin, where the cream of the crop is as high? But let's face it, in terms of college talent, Wisconsin's what? Mid-20s? Close to 30 in terms of high school rankings in the nation? Sometimes talent falls through the cracks. Sometimes talent falls through the cracks for various reasons. And I've said it before. It could be they had a growth spurt. They were from a small town, under-recruited, under-evaluated, whatever. Talent's talent. And I really like some of these lower-level guys that they're bringing in. And I like some of the higher-level guys. Okay? The Ohio State wide receiver. The Louisville outside linebacker. We get talent from the big names, but some of those big names haven't played more than a handful of snaps over the years. So it all depends on what you really want to see on the field. All right. Next up is a question that is kind of a culmination of a series of questions I have gotten throughout the season, throughout last year. And I put these questions into what I call the clearly category. What do I mean by clearly? Well, a lot of these questions start with, and I'm not saying this one exactly that I got, but a lot of them, clearly so-and-so doesn't know how to do something. And when I hear fans who their only connection to football is what they see on Saturday and Sunday on television say stuff like that, first thing, I'm kind of insulted. Because if you think our job is that easy, then, and I'm lumping myself in with them, same thing. That's kind of sad. But a lot of times, the people who make statements like this, and I'm not saying the actual question holder that I got this one from on Twitter is thinking this, but a lot of them ask these questions with emotion and don't actually look at the numbers. What do I mean by that? Because the most recent question I had was essentially, clearly, Mike Tressel doesn't know how to stop the defense or stop the run. He didn't do it at Michigan State. He didn't do it at Cincinnati. And he's not doing it at Wisconsin. What's the deal? What is his philosophy for stopping the run? His philosophy for stopping the run is to fit gaps, to get downhill, and to tackle the football. Boom. That's it. I know a lot of people are expecting to say, well, I don't know. Clearly, he doesn't know how to stop the run. Or, I don't know. I think he just lets the players play with no discipline and score what the hell they want. Clearly, that's not the case if you listen to the exit interviews. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So that's his philosophy in the run defense. But let's look at the numbers a little bit and why maybe his success against the run is not what you expect it to be. Saying he didn't stop the run at Michigan State is false. In 2 years at Michigan State, his rush defense gave up less than 3 yards a carry. That's stopping the run. There were a couple instances where they didn't, and that was against Wisconsin and against Ohio State. High volume rushing teams. Volume. Let's remember that word. At Cincinnati, again, his defenses gave up between 2.9 and like 3.5 yards a carry. Rushing. Couple things with that. Why I don't care about that so much as other people do. One, total defense. Scoring defense. That's what I care about. That's one. Two, volume. They play against Navy, and Navy runs about 70 times. They're going to get 200 yards. But 200 yards when you have 70 carries is less than 3 yards a carry. Going to the fact the year they went to the playoffs, I think they played 3 out of the top 10, top 11 rushing offenses in the country. They beat them all. And they played against a lot of teams that ran with volume. So that's important. And then 3. It's very important to understand, especially at Cincinnati, what type of league they were playing in. A league where the offenses are wide open. So there are some concessions you have to make defensively. You have to understand that I want to stop my opposing team from scoring as a whole and not just shut down one aspect of their game because of how offenses run formationally, tempo-wise, etc. So, to commit extra bodies to the box, bigger bodies to the box, and they had a problem with this at Ohio State or at Cincinnati the first year. That's why they switched up their defense. Is they played the Ohio State 4-3 when they first came to Cincinnati, and it didn't work because, yes, they could stop the run, but they were too slow and too compact to stop any of the bigger, more wide-open offenses. Even Navy. Especially Navy, actually. So they had to accommodate to what their opposing offenses were doing. And in doing that, there are some sacrifices that have to be made. Get to Wisconsin. Why doesn't he stop the run here? Well, ask Kurt Neal. Leave it at that. Got a little snarky there at the end of that last question. All right. Last one we're going to talk about. Coming up to my destination here pretty soon. And that is basically, and again, I probably should write these questions down sometimes. Why have we gone to so much trouble to destroy the identity that Paul Chryst and Jim Leonard started to then come back to it? I'll start with Jim Leonard. Again, I'll keep saying this, and I'll keep saying this until the cows come home. The defense hasn't changed with Jim Leonard. At its core, the Badgers are still running the same 3-4 defense that Jim Leonard did. And I know everyone's going to be saying, but they ran the 2-4. They ran too much of the 2-4. Mike Tressel and Luke Fickell has run the 2-4 as much as Jim Leonard. In fact, in certain situations, Jim Leonard ran the 2-4 more than the current team does. So stop it. What's the difference between the Jim Leonard defense and this one? Look at the roster. Again, I'm not going to rehash the same points over and over again. And to say that about the offense, well, the offense is, in terms of production, pretty much the same. We just don't have the generational running back. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
Ryan from the future here, and I actually have those numbers that I was just talking about. I got to my destination, thought pull out the laptop and go through it, and show you how insanely Badger quarterback Braden Locke has been in his last 13 games starting for the Badgers in the Big Ten. So let's take a look at it real quick. In his last 13 games, Joel Stave completed 174 out of 309 passes, a 57.7% completion percentage for 2,181 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Alex Hornibrook went 146 of 253, 57.8% completion percentage for 1,753 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. Jack Cohn was 186, and Jack Cohn is the outlier of this group. He was 186 of 281, which is a 66.2% completion percentage for 2,127 yards with 13 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. It's still not earth-shattering. Good completion percentage, though. Graham Mertz was 153 of 280, a 54.6% completion percentage for 1,755 yards, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And then finally, Braden Locke, the worst quarterback in Badger history, was 211 of 389, 54.2% completion percentage for 2,450 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So what do we want to say here? I mean, if you look at their ratings, then that's the easiest way to compare them all. Now, Braden Locke is second worst. Okay? But, I mean, you look at the numbers, it's not that much different. You know what the big difference was? The running backs. When you play a run-first offense, and you have really good running backs, you can win a lot of games. And the quarterback's job is to hold the fort. And guarantee if you look at the guys in the past, at their stats in games that the Badgers couldn't run the ball, big difference. Anyways, that is, take a look at the numbers. Now let's get back to me as I'm walking and talking.
But if you look at quarterback play in the Paul Chryst era, and you look at the quarterback play with Braden Locke, they're basically the same. Okay, from the high water mark that was Jack Cohn to the low water mark that was Joel Stave. If you compare the same games, the last 13 games, all 5 of the last previous quarterbacks have played, it's virtually the same. What's the difference? Well, play caller is different. I'll give you that. Butting heads between the offensive coordinator and the head coach, that's another thing. But also, no, Jonathan Taylor, Melvin Gordon, James White, Monte Ball. All those guys. When you don't have a generational running back, it's a shock that the offense isn't working as good, right? So, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The offense that they're looking to run now, if Paul Chryst would have smartened up and did that back in 2021, he'd still have a job. But he was, like many coaches who are married to a system, he just believed, give it time and it'll get better again. When the game was getting to a point where you could out-athlete his defense, or his offense, excuse me. It gets away from being able to scheme things open, scheme plays open. It just gets to a point where teams can just be better than you and beat you. And that's a direction we have to get away from. I think Jeff Grimes he's the happy medium between the Paul Chryst Pro style and the air raid. And I think he has the tools here to succeed. And we're just going to have to see. All right. Well, that's going to be it for today. Pretty short, pretty quick walk and talk, because I actually have some work I got to do today. So thank you for the questions. Keep dropping them in the inbox. More transfer portal videos coming out in the next couple of days. But until then, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.